A chilling telegram arrives at midnight, bearing words that spell doom for a wealthy industrialist. Poisoned secrets, hidden motives, and a killer lurking in the shadows. Welcome to The Midnight Telegram, a Message of Death, a Hercule Poirot mystery that will keep you guessing until the very end. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and settle in to enjoy this twisting tale. If you're hooked on the suspense, hit that subscribe button. Your support means a lot to us as we unravel more mysteries together. Chapter 1. The ominous arrival in the quiet elegance of a London townhouse on a foggy autumn evening in 1935. The renowned Belgian detective Hercule Poirot sat by the fireside, his moustache impeccably waxed, sipping a tisane as he pondered the intricacies of human nature. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany furniture and the rows of leather-bound books that lined the walls. Poirot's friend and confidant, Captain Arthur Hastings, lounged in an armchair opposite him, flipping through the evening newspaper with a contented sigh. "Ah, Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said in his precise, accented English. "There is nothing quite like a peaceful night to restore the little grey cells." Hastings nodded agreeably, murmuring something about the latest cricket scores, when suddenly the sharp rap of the door-knocker echoed through the house. It was George, Poirot's impeccable valet, who entered moments later, holding a silver tray with a single yellow envelope upon it. "A telegram for you, sir," George announced with his usual stoic demeanour. "Delivered just now by a messenger boy. He seemed in quite a hurry." Poirot's sharp eyes narrowed as he took the envelope, noting the urgent stamp and the late hour, nearly midnight. Telegrams at such a time rarely brought good tidings. With a flick of his manicured fingers, he tore it open and read the message aloud. "Urgent. Come at once. Murder suspected. Lord Edgware dead by poison. Your expertise needed. Inspector Japp." Scotland Yard. Hastings bolted upright, his newspaper forgotten. "Good heavens, Poirot. Lord Edgware, the industrial tycoon. I read about him just last week. Made his fortune in steel mills, married that American actress, Jane Wilkinson. What a scandal their divorce was." Poirot stroked his moustache thoughtfully, his mind already whirring like a well-oiled machine. "Why, Hastings, Lord Edgware was a man of great wealth and even greater enemies. Poison, you say? A coward's weapon, subtle and insidious. We must depart immediately." Within minutes, they were bundled into coats and hats, hailing a taxi through the misty streets toward Edgware's opulent mansion on the outskirts of the city. Upon arrival, the scene was one of controlled chaos. Police constables guarded the wrought-iron gates, their lanterns flickering in the damp night air. Inspector Japp, a burly man with a no-nonsense moustache of his own, greeted them at the door with a grim nod. "Poirot, old chap, glad you could make it. It's a nasty business. Lord Edgware was found dead in his study an hour ago, collapsed over his desk with a half-empty glass of brandy. The doctor suspects arsenic, but will need the autopsy to confirm. No signs of forced entry, and the household staff swear no one unusual came by tonight." Japp led them through the grand hallway, adorned with crystal chandeliers and marble statues, into the study where the body still lay, covered by a sheet. Poirot knelt beside the corpse, his keen eyes scanning every detail, the rigid fingers clutching a crumpled note, the faint scent of almonds lingering in the air, a telltale sign of cyanide, not arsenic as initially thought. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "this is no ordinary poison. Cyanide acts swiftly, painfully. And look here, the telegram on his desk." Hastings peered over his shoulder as Poirot unfolded a similar yellow envelope, this one addressed to Lord Edgware. The message inside was cryptic and chilling. "Your sins catch up tonight. Death comes at midnight." Sent anonymously, time-stamped just hours before. The room itself told a story of luxury and isolation. Bookshelves groaned under volumes of business ledgers and rare first editions. A massive oak desk dominated the centre, scattered with papers detailing Edgware's latest ventures, mergers with rival companies, disputes over labour unions. On the mantelpiece sat a framed photograph of Edgware with his ex-wife, Jane Wilkinson, her glamorous smile contrasting his stern expression. She wanted out of the marriage badly, Japp explained, puffing on his pipe. Claimed he was controlling, refused her a divorce at first. But they settled it amicably last month. She's starring in a West End play now. The Fatal Hour, ironically enough. Poirot paced the room, his little grey cells assembling the puzzle. He questioned the butler, a nervous man named Alton, who admitted serving the brandy at 10 p.m. His lordship seemed agitated all evening, sir. Kept checking his watch, muttering about old debts. No visitors, though a quiet night. The maid, Miss Lemon, no relation to Poirot's future secretary, reported finding the body while bringing in the midnight post. He was gasping, clutching his throat. I screamed for help, but it was too late. Poirot noted the open window, curtains billowing slightly. Could the killer have slipped in unseen? As the clock struck 1, Poirot gathered Japp and Hastings in the drawing room. This is not mere murder, mes amis. It is a message. The telegram to Edgware warns of death at midnight, and so it came. But why poison? Why announce it? The killer wants us to know, perhaps to taunt or to frame someone. Hastings shivered. Who could it be? His business rivals? That shady partner, Ronald Marsh? Or maybe the ex-wife? She benefits from his will. Japp grunted. We've got alibis to check. Marsh was at a club, Wilkinson on stage. But there's more. The poison was in the brandy decanter, doctored sometime today. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, but the key is the telegram. Who sent it? And why mimic the one that summoned me? There is a connection, a web of deceit. He examined the envelope again, spotting a faint postmark from a small village station. Odd for a London delivery. We must trace this back. Tomorrow, interviews begin. As the chapter of this fateful night draws to a close, the mystery deepens. Was it revenge, greed, or something more sinister? The little Belgian detective is on the case, and the shadows of suspicion fall on all who knew Lord Edgware. Stay tuned for the revelations ahead. Chapter 2. Shadows of Motive. The morning sun barely pierced the heavy fog blanketing London as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrived at the bustling West End theatre where Jane Wilkinson, Lord Edgware's glamorous ex-wife, was rehearsing for her latest play. The air was thick with the scent of grease paint and polished wood as they navigated through a maze of stagehands, hauling props, and actors murmuring lines. Poirot's polished shoes clicked on the hardwood floor, his keen eyes scanning the chaotic scene for the leading lady. Hastings, ever the admirer of beauty, adjusted his tie nervously. She's quite the star, Poirot. Do you think she could really be mixed up in this? They found Jane Wilkinson in her dressing room, a vision in a silk robe, her golden hair catching the light of a mirrored vanity. She was applying rouge with a practiced hand, her expression serene despite the grim reason for their visit. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, she greeted, her American accent warm but tinged with theatrical flair. I heard about poor George, dreadful news, but I assure you, I was on stage all evening, captivating my audience. Murder? Why, I couldn't harm a fly. Her laugh was musical, but Poirot's gaze remained steady, searching for cracks in her polished demeanour. He began with gentle precision. Madame, your marriage to Lord Edgware was, shall we say, turbulent. Yet you settled amicably, oui? Jane nodded, setting down her makeup brush. George was difficult, controlling, cold. I wanted my freedom to live, to act, to love again. He finally agreed to the divorce, no fuss, last month. I got a tidy sum, enough to keep me comfortable. She leaned forward, eyes wide. But kill him? Never. I'm free now, happier than ever. Why risk it all? Poirot noted the sincerity in her voice, but also the quick flick of her eyes toward a photograph on her vanity. A dashing young man in a tailored suit, signed, With Love, Donald. Hastings jumped in. This Donald, your new beau perhaps? Jane's smile tightened. Donald Ross, my co-star. A dear friend, nothing more. He was with me at the theatre last night, rehearsing late. Poirot made a mental note to verify this alibi. And this photograph, madame, it suggests affection, no? Jane waved a dismissive hand. Fans send me such things. Donald's a charmer, but I'm not one to settle down so soon. Her nonchalance was convincing, yet Poirot sensed a guarded edge, as if she were playing a role even now. Leaving the theatre, Poirot and Hastings headed to a smoky gentleman's club in Mayfair to meet Ronald Marsh, Lord Edgware's former business partner and nephew, known for his reckless spending and questionable ethics. The club was a den of leather armchairs and hushed conversations, the air thick with cigar smoke. Marsh, a lanky man with slicked back hair and a nervous grin, greeted them at a corner table. "Poirot, isn't it? Heard you're poking around Uncle George's death. Tragic, really." But the old man had enemies. His casual tone grated on Hastings, who bristled. "You don't seem terribly broken up about it," Marsh shrugged, sipping a whiskey. "Uncle was a tyrant in business, ruthless, cutthroat. I worked for him. But we parted ways last year after a row over profits. He accused me of skimming funds, which I didn't, mind you. Still, I'm in his will, so I suppose that makes me a suspect." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And where were you, Monsieur Marsh, at midnight?" Marsh leaned back, unfazed. "Here, playing cards with the lads. Dozen witnesses can vouch for me. Ask the barman, old chap named Perkins." His confidence was almost too smooth, and Poirot noted the slight tremor in his hand as he set down his glass. Back at Scotland Yard, Inspector Japp awaited with new findings. The autopsy confirmed cyanide in Lord Edgware's system, ingested via the brandy. "Here's the kicker," Japp said, tossing a file onto his desk. The decanter was laced, but only one glass was poured. Someone knew exactly when he'd drink, and that village postmark on the telegram, traced to a tiny station in Kent, used rarely. Whoever sent it went out of their way to cover their tracks. Poirot frowned, piecing together the puzzle. The killer is meticulous, Japp. They planned this. Perhaps someone close, someone trusted. Their next stop was the Edgware estate to interview the staff again. The cook, Mrs. Baxter, a stout woman with flour-dusted hands, was adamant no strangers entered the kitchen where the brandy decanter was kept. "I filled it myself yesterday morning, sir, from a sealed bottle. No one touched it after, not that I saw." The footman, a young lad named Tommy, mentioned seeing a delivery boy near the back gate around noon. "Didn't think much of it, sir. He dropped off a parcel in Scarpard. Looked ordinary enough." Poirot's interest piqued. Could the boy have tampered with the decanter under the guise of a delivery? As the day wore on, Poirot and Hastings sat in a quiet tea shop, the detective sketching a diagram of suspects and timelines on a napkin. "Consider, Hastings. Jane Wilkinson gains freedom and wealth from the divorce, yet her new friend Donald Ross may have ambitions. Ronald Marsh inherits a fortune but claims an alibi. The staff saw no intruders, yet a mysterious delivery boy appears. And the telegram, sent from Kent, a deliberate choice to obscure the sender." Hastings rubbed his chin. "It's a devilish tangle, Poirot. Could it be someone outside the circle? A rival tycoon, perhaps?" Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. This is personal. The cyanide, the telegram. These are not the acts of a distant enemy, but of one who knew Lord Edgware's habits, his vulnerabilities. We must dig deeper into their lives." As they finished their tea, Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. The killer had left a trail, however faint, and he was determined to follow it. The day's interviews had revealed motives: greed, love, revenge. But the truth remained elusive, hidden in the shadows of alibis and half-truths. The mystery tightens its grip, and the next step promises to unravel secrets even darker. Stay tuned for what lies ahead. Chapter 3. The Hidden Correspondence. The drizzle had turned into a steady rain as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stepped out of the tea shop. their umbrellas bobbing through the crowded London streets. Poirot's mind was a whirl of clues, each fragment of the case like a piece of a jigsaw puzzle yet to find its place. Their next destination was the small Kent village post office where the cryptic telegram to Lord Edgware had been sent. The journey by train was brisk, the countryside blurring past in shades of grey and green. But Poirot's focus remained razor-sharp. "Hastings, mon ami," he said, tapping his temple. "The telegram is the key. Its origin is no accident. Someone chose this obscure post office to hide their intent." The village of Ashford was little more than a cluster of stone cottages and a single cobbled street. The post office, a quaint building with ivy clinging to its walls. Inside, a bespectacled postmistress named Mrs. Harrow greeted them with a wary smile. "A telegram, you say? We don't send many. Not out here." Poirot produced the envelope, its Kent postmark clear under the dim light of a gas lamp. "This was sent 2 days ago, madame. Can you recall who brought it?" Mrs. Harrow adjusted her glasses, studying the envelope. "Well now, I remember a young man, city type, in a hurry, wore a grey coat, scarf over his face. Paid in cash and left quick as you please. Didn't give a name, but he had a posh accent. London, I'd wager." Hastings frowned. "Sounds like he was covering his tracks. Did he say anything else?" Mrs. Harrow shook her head. "Not a word. Just handed me the message and dashed off. Odd, though. The telegram was typed, not handwritten. Most folks write theirs out." Poirot's eyes lit up at this detail. "Typed, you say? Most intriguing. Did you keep the original form?" Mrs. Harrow rummaged through a drawer and produced a carbon copy. The words, "Your sins catch up tonight. Death comes at midnight," stark against the faded paper. Poirot tucked it away, his mind already racing. A typed message suggested premeditation, access to a typewriter, perhaps someone from Edgware's inner circle. Back in London, they visited the Edgware estate to examine the study more closely. The police had cordoned off the room, but Poirot's reputation granted them access. The study was as they'd left it, the oak desk strewn with papers, the brandy decanter now sealed in an evidence bag. Poirot's attention turned to a small locked drawer in the desk, which Inspector Japp had overlooked. With a hairpin from his pocket, a trick he'd mastered long ago, Poirot deftly picked the lock. Inside lay a bundle of letters, tied with a red ribbon, their envelopes addressed to Lord Edgware in a looping feminine hand. Hastings peered over his shoulder as Poirot opened one. "My word, Poirot, these are from Jane Wilkinson, but they're dated years ago, before their marriage." The letters were passionate, pleading, filled with promises of love and devotion. One, however, stood out, dated just weeks before the divorce. "George, you cannot cage me forever," it read. "I will be free whatever the cost." Poirot's moustache twitched. A woman scorned, Hastings, or a calculated hint at motive? These letters were hidden for a reason. He slipped them into his coat, determined to confront Jane Wilkinson later. Their next lead took them to the delivery boy Tommy had mentioned. After inquiries at local courier services, they tracked down a lad named Billy, barely 16, with a shock of red hair and a nervous stammer. I delivered a parcel to the Edgware house, sirs, round noon that day," he said, fidgeting outside a bakery where he worked part-time. "Just some books," the man said. "Gave me a shilling to leave it at the back gate," Poirot pressed gently. "This man, what did he look like?" Billy shrugged. Tall dark coat, hat pulled low. Didn't see his face clear. Said it was urgent, though. The description was vague, maddeningly so, but Poirot noted the pattern. Another figure cloaked in anonymity. As evening fell, they met Japp at a quiet pub near Scotland Yard to review the day's findings. Over pints of ale, Japp shared a new detail. "We checked Marsh's alibi at the club. Barman confirms he was there, but he slipped out for about 20 minutes around 10 p.m. Says he was getting air, but it's enough time to get to the Edgware estate and back." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "And Donald Ross, the actor? His alibi with Madame Wilkinson?" Jap grunted. Solid, so far. Theatre manager says they were both on stage or backstage all night. But we're digging deeper. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. The web tightens, mes amis. The telegram, sent from Kent by a mysterious man. The letters, hidden away, revealing Jane's desperation. The delivery boy, a possible distraction, or an accomplice. And Marsh, whose alibi wavers. Someone orchestrated this murder with care, planting clues to mislead us. Hastings sipped his ale, puzzled. But why the telegram? Why warn Edgware at all? Poirot's eyes gleamed. To ensure fear, Hastings. To make him look over his shoulder. To suspect betrayal. The killer wanted him to suffer before the end. As they left the pub, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective under the gaslights. Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. The typed telegram pointed to someone with access to a typewriter, perhaps in an office, a theatre, or a business. The hidden letters suggested Edgware kept secrets, even from those closest to him. And the shadowy figures, the man in Kent, the delivery client, hinted at a larger conspiracy. The truth was closer, but still veiled, waiting for Poirot's little grey cells to pierce the fog. The investigation moves forward, with new suspects and secrets emerging from the shadows. Stay tuned for the next twist in this deadly game. Chapter 4. The Actor's Mask. The London air was crisp as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to the West End Theatre once more, the morning sun casting long shadows across the cobblestones. Their focus now was Donald Ross, Jane Wilkinson's charming co-star, whose photograph in her dressing room had raised Poirot's suspicions. The theatre was alive with the hum of rehearsal, actors pacing the stage, reciting lines, while a pianist hammered out a lively tune. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the scene, noting the easy camaraderie among the cast, but his interest lay in one man. Hastings, he murmured. Monsieur Ross may wear the mask of an actor, but what lies beneath? We shall see. They found Donald Ross backstage, leaning against a prop table, his dark hair tousled and his smile disarming. He was in costume, a dashing hero's attire for the fatal hour, and his easy confidence filled the cramped space. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, he greeted, extending a hand. Jane mentioned you'd be sniffing around. Terrible business about Lord Edgware. I barely knew the man, but Jane's shaken, poor thing. His voice was smooth, practiced, but Poirot's gaze lingered on the slight tension in his jaw. Poirot began with his usual precision. Monsieur Ross, you were with Madame Wilkinson the night of the murder, oui? On stage all evening? Ross nodded, wiping his hands on a cloth. Absolutely. We had a full dress rehearsal, hundreds of eyes on us. I was either performing or waiting in the wings. No time to slip away. Hastings raised an eyebrow. And your relationship with Miss Wilkinson? That photograph in her dressing room suggests more than friendship. Ross laughed, a touch too loudly. Jane's a star, Captain. I'm just lucky to share the stage. That photo? A gift for a fan, nothing more. She's got dozens like it. Poirot's moustache twitched as he produced the photograph, its inscription, "With love, Donald," glinting in the stage lights. This, monsieur, implies affection. Were you close to Lord Edgware? Perhaps through Madame Wilkinson. Ross's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. Never met him. Jane kept her marriage private. I heard he was a tough sort, though. Made enemies in business. Maybe one of them did him in. Poirot noted the deflection, filing it away. And where might one find a typewriter in this theatre? He asked casually. Ross blinked. Typewriter? In the manager's office, I suppose. We use it for scripts and schedules. Why? Poirot merely smiled, revealing nothing. Leaving the theatre, they headed to a nearby cafe to meet Inspector Japp, who had been chasing leads on the mysterious delivery client. Over steaming cups of coffee, Japp shared his findings. That delivery boy, Billy, gave us a sketchy description, but we've traced the parcel order to a small stationer's shop in Soho. The clerk remembers a man in a dark coat, hat low, buying wrapping paper and paying for a rush delivery to the Edgware estate. No name, paid in cash. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The same description as the man at the Kent post office. This is no coincidence, Jap. Our killer is careful, but not invisible. Their next stop was the stationer's shop, a cramped store cluttered with pens, paper, and dusty ledgers. The clerk, a wiry man named Mr. Phipps, confirmed Jap's account. Aye, he was in a hurry, that one. Bought brown paper, string, and asked about same-day delivery. Said it was for a surprise gift. Looked nervous. Kept glancing out the window. Poirot pressed for details, but Phipps could only add that the man had a faint scar above his left eyebrow, barely visible, but distinct. A scar, Poirot murmured to Hastings as they left. A clue, however small. We must keep this in mind. Back at the Edgware estate, Poirot requested a private audience with Miss Lemon, the maid who had found the body. She sat nervously in the drawing room, twisting her apron. "I've told you all I know, sir. His lordship was dead when I came in with the post." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Mademoiselle, you mentioned Lord Edgware seemed agitated that evening. Did he receive any other telegrams or letters recently?" Miss Lemon hesitated, then nodded. "There was another telegram, sir, a few days before. He read it, turned pale, and burned it in the fireplace. I didn't see the words, but he muttered something about debts being paid." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. Another telegram destroyed. An earlier warning, perhaps. He thanked Miss Lemon and turned his attention to the fireplace, where faint traces of ash remained. Using a small brush from his pocket, he collected a sample, noting tiny fragments of yellow paper, consistent with telegram forms. "Hastings, this confirms it. The killer taunted Lord Edgware before the fatal night. But why destroy the first message and not the second?" Hastings rubbed his chin. Maybe he thought it was a prank at first, but the second one hit too close to home. As dusk settled over London, Poirot and Hastings stood outside the estate, the weight of the case pressing down. The actor, Donald Ross, had an airtight alibi, but a questionable connection to Jane Wilkinson. The mysterious man with the scar linked the Kent telegram and the Soho delivery, suggesting a single orchestrator behind the scenes. And the burned telegram hinted at a deeper history of threats, tied to Edgware's cryptic debts. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with connections, each clue a thread in a tightening net. "The killer is cunning," he said softly. "But they cannot hide forever. We must look closer at those around Lord Edgware, those who knew his fears. The mystery deepens, with new faces and old secrets emerging. Stay tuned for what lies beyond the curtain." Chapter 5. The Business of Betrayal. The London sky was heavy with clouds as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings ventured into the heart of the city's financial district, where the late Lord Edgware's steel empire was headquartered. The towering office building, all glass and stone, loomed over Threadneedle Street, a monument to wealth and ambition. Their goal was to investigate Edgware's business dealings, particularly his strained relationship with a former associate, Sir Montague Bryce, a rival industrialist rumoured to have clashed with Edgware over a lucrative merger. "Hastings," Poirot said, adjusting his hat against the wind. "A man like Lord Edgware does not amass a fortune without stepping on toes. We must uncover which toes were crushed hardest." Inside, the office buzzed with clerks shuffling papers and typewriters clacking, a stark contrast to the sombre mood of the Edgware household. They were ushered into Sir Montague's private office, a cavernous room lined with oil paintings of factories and ships. Sir Montague, a broad-shouldered man with a greying beard and piercing eyes, greeted them with a curt nod. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, I expected Scotland Yard would come sniffing around. Edgware's death is a shock, but not entirely surprising. The man played a ruthless game." His voice carried a hint of disdain, and Poirot's keen senses detected an undercurrent of satisfaction. Poirot began delicately. "Sir Montague, it is said you and Lord Edgware were at odds over a merger last year. Can you enlighten us?" Bryce leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "Edgware wanted to absorb my steelworks into his empire, offered a pittance for my shares. I refused, and he retaliated by undercutting my contracts, poaching my clients. Cost me thousands. But I'm no murderer, Poirot. I was at my country estate in Surrey the night he died. My staff can confirm it. Hastings scribbled notes, but Poirot's eyes were drawn to a typewriter on a side table, its keys gleaming under the lamplight. This machine, monsieur, it is used often. Bryce shrugged. My secretary types correspondence. Why do you ask? Poirot merely smiled, noting the brand, identical to one he'd seen in the theatre manager's office. Leaving Bryce's office, they visited the Edgware Company archives, where a nervous clerk named Mr. Fenton allowed them to review recent files. Among ledgers and contracts, Poirot found a series of heated letters between Edgware and Bryce, accusing each other of sabotage and deceit. One document stood out: a draft agreement for a secret deal to sell off a failing subsidiary, signed by Edgware and an unknown partner. The signature was illegible, but a marginal note in Edgware's hand read, "Marsh to handle discreetly." Hastings raised an eyebrow. Ronald Marsh again? Was he brokering deals behind the scenes? Poirot nodded. Perhaps Hastings, or perhaps he was being used as a pawn. Their next stop was a discreet meeting with a former Edgware employee, Miss Clara Trent, who had been sacked months earlier for insubordination. They met her at a small tea room, where she sat stiffly, her dark eyes wary. "I worked as Edgware's personal secretary," she said, stirring her tea. "He was a tyrant, demanded loyalty but gave none. I was fired after questioning his decision to sell that subsidiary. He said it was none of my concern, but I heard rumours he was hiding losses to inflate his stock." Poirot leaned forward. "And who else knew of this, mademoiselle?" Clara hesitated. "Ronald Marsh was involved. He handled the paperwork, and I saw him arguing with a man in a dark coat outside the office one evening. Couldn't hear much, but Marsh looked furious." The description of the man in the dark coat pricked Poirot's memory. The same figure linked to the Kent telegram and the Soho delivery. He pressed Clara further. "This man, any distinguishing features?" She frowned, thinking. "He had a scar, I think, above his eyebrow. Hard to see in the dark." Poirot's pulse quickened. The scar was a recurring thread, tying the clues together. He thanked Clara and handed her his card, urging her to contact him if she recalled more. As evening approached, Poirot and Hastings joined Inspector Japp at Scotland Yard to compare notes. Japp had uncovered a new lead. A witness near the Edgware estate reported seeing a man in a grey coat lingering near the back gate hours before the murder. "Matches the description from Kent and Soho," Japp said, chewing on his pipe. "But we've got no name, no clear motive, and Marsh's alibi from the club still holds. Just that 20-minute gap." Poirot tapped his cane on the floor. "The gap is enough, Japp. And this subsidiary deal, Marsh's role in it suggests he knew secrets Edgware wished to keep buried. Secrets worth killing for, perhaps." Back at Poirot's flat, the detective spread out his notes, sketching connections on a sheet of paper. Sir Montague's grudge, Marsh's involvement in the shady deal, and Clara's tale of betrayal painted a picture of a business world rife with treachery. The man with the scar loomed large, a shadow moving through each lead: telegram, delivery, argument. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low. "The motive lies in betrayal. Edgware crossed someone, perhaps many. But the killer is close, intimate with his world. The scar is our link, but we need a face to match it." Hastings yawned, exhausted. "It's like chasing a ghost, Poirot. Could it be Bryce pulling strings from afar?" Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. Bryce is too proud for such subtlety. This is the work of a quieter hand." As the fire crackled in the hearth, Poirot's mind wove the threads together. The secret deal, the burned telegram, the poisoned brandy, all pointed to someone who knew Edgware's vulnerabilities and exploited them with precision. The investigation was closing in, but the killer remained just out of reach, their identity hidden behind a carefully crafted facade. The stakes rise as the net tightens around the suspects. Stay tuned for the next revelation in this deadly puzzle. Chapter 6. The echoes of envy. The morning mist clung to the streets of London as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings set out for the Edgware estate once more, their breath visible in the chilly air. The detective's mind buzzed with the threads of the case, the man with the scar, the secret business deal, and the lingering question of who had the means and motive to slip cyanide into Lord Edgware's brandy. Today, their focus was the household itself, the inner circle of servants and confidants who moved silently through the mansion's opulent halls. "Hastings," Poirot said, his cane tapping rhythmically on the pavement. "The killer walked among those Lord Edgware trusted most. We must listen for the whispers of envy, for they often betray the guilty." At the estate, the grand doors opened to reveal Alton, the butler, his face pale and drawn. The household was still reeling from the murder, the air heavy with unease. Poirot requested a private meeting with the entire staff in the servants' hall, a stark, functional room below stairs, lined with wooden benches and a single oil lamp flickering on the table. The gathered staff, Alton, Mrs. Baxter the cook, Miss Lemon the maid, Tommy the footman, and a scullery maid named Polly, sat stiffly, their eyes darting nervously. Poirot stood before them, his small stature commanding the room. "Mes amis," he began, his voice calm but piercing. "One of you may hold the key to Lord Edgware's death, knowingly or not. Tell me of his habits, his visitors, his moods in the days before." Alton cleared his throat, his hands clasped tightly. "His lordship was particular, sir, kept to himself mostly, especially after the divorce. But lately he'd been short-tempered, locking himself in the study for hours. Said he was working on private matters." Mrs. Baxter nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "He barely ate my dinners last week, just picked at his food. Kept asking for the brandy decanter to be refilled, though. Unusual for him, he wasn't a heavy drinker." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "And who handled the decanter, madame?" She flushed. "I filled it, sir, from a sealed bottle in the cellar. Tommy brought it up, and Alton served it. No one else touched it." Tommy, the young footman, shifted uncomfortably. "I just did as told, sir. Took the bottle from the cellar, handed it to Mrs. Baxter. Didn't open it." Poirot turned to Polly, the scullery maid, a shy girl barely out of her teens, who had been silent. "Mademoiselle Polly, you clean the rooms, oui? Did you see anything unusual near the study? Papers, visitors, anything out of place?" Polly's cheeks reddened, and she stammered. I saw a man, sir, 2 days before, near the garden gate, late at night. He was talking to Mr. Alton, quiet-like. I didn't hear much, just caught a glimpse. He had a scar on his face here." She touched her left eyebrow, her voice trembling. Alton's face tightened and he spoke quickly. "That was just a tradesman, sir, delivering coal. Nothing unusual." But Poirot's gaze locked onto him, noting the beads of sweat on his brow. "A coal delivery at night, Monsieur Alton? Most curious. Describe this man." Alton faltered. "Dark coat, hat, like Polly said. I didn't see a scar. Too dark. He dropped off the coal and left." Poirot made a mental note, the scar once again tying this encounter to the mysterious figure haunting their investigation. Leaving the servants' hall, Poirot and Hastings explored the cellar, a damp, cavernous space lined with wine racks and crates. The brandy stock was neatly arranged, but Poirot noticed one bottle slightly askew, its seal intact, but the wax around the cork faintly scratched, as if tampered with. "Hastings," he said, holding the bottle to the light. "This may be our point of entry. The cyanide was added before the decanter was filled. Perhaps here." He bagged the bottle for Japp's forensic team, his mind racing. The cellar was accessible to all the staff, but only someone with knowledge of Edgware's habits would know to target the brandy. Their next lead took them to a discreet inquiry about Alton's background. At a local registry office, they reviewed employment records, discovering that Alton had worked for Sir Montague Bryce before joining Edgware's household 2 years ago. "A connection," Hastings said, his eyes wide. "Could Alton be Bryce's man planted to spy or worse?" Poirot nodded. Possible, mon ami. Or perhaps Alton carries his own grudge. His nervousness today was not that of an innocent man. By afternoon, they met Inspector Japp at a bustling police station, where he shared a breakthrough. We've identified the typewriter used for the telegram, Japp said, slamming a report on his desk. It's a model found in Bryce's office, but also in the theatre manager's office. No fingerprints, though, wiped clean. And we've got a witness who saw a man with a scar near the Kent post office, boarding a train to London the same day the telegram was sent. Poirot's moustache twitched. The net closes, Japp. Alton's tradesman, the scarred man, the typewriter, all point to a conspiracy rooted in betrayal. But whose? As night fell, Poirot and Hastings sat in a quiet corner of a tavern, the detective sketching a timeline on a napkin. Alton's link to Bryce, the tampered bottle, and Polly's sighting of the scarred man wove a complex web. Envy drives this crime, Poirot mused. Someone resented Edgware's power, his wealth, his control. Alton knows more than he admits, and the cellar is our stage. But the scarred man, he is the shadow we must unmask. Hastings sipped his stout, frowning. What about the other telegram? The one Edgware burned. Could it name the killer? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisely, Hastings. We must find who sent it, and why it was destroyed. The rain began again, tapping against the tavern's windows as Poirot stared into the firelight. The household was a nest of secrets, each servant a potential player in the deadly game. Alton's connection to Bryce, the scarred man's recurring presence, and the tampered brandy bottle pointed to a plot orchestrated with chilling precision. The truth was near, but danger lurked closer still, as the killer watched from the shadows. The investigation plunges deeper into the heart of deceit, with revelations waiting to break the case wide open. Stay tuned for the next chapter in this deadly dance. Chapter 7. The Unveiled Ally. The first rays of dawn filtered through the lace curtains of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting a soft, golden glow across the room where the detective sat at his breakfast table. A silver tray held his customary hot chocolate, a perfectly boiled egg, and 2 slices of toast cut into precise triangles. Captain Hastings, ever the early riser, paced the room with a newspaper in hand, his face etched with the frustration of the previous day's unanswered questions. The fire in the grate crackled softly, providing a counterpoint to the ticking of the mantel clock. Poirot, immaculate in his dressing gown, sipped his chocolate thoughtfully, his little grey cells already at work on the tangled web of the Edgware case. The scarred man, the tampered brandy bottle, Alton's evasive demeanour, these elements swirled in his mind like leaves in an autumn breeze. Hastings, mon ami, Poirot said at last, setting down his cup with a delicate clink. Today we return to the Edgware estate with purpose. The butler, Alton, he is the linchpin. His connection to Sir Montague Bryce, his meeting with the scarred man in the garden, these are not coincidences. We must press him, gently but firmly, until the truth emerges. Hastings folded the newspaper with a nod, his military bearing evident in his straight posture. Right you are, Poirot. And that scarred fellow, he's popped up too many times to be ignored. Could Alton be protecting him, or worse, be him? Poirot's moustache quivered slightly, a sign of his inner amusement at Hastings' directness. We shall see, my friend. The human face betrays much, especially when confronted with its own secrets. They dressed quickly. Poirot in his trademark patent leather shoes, neatly pressed suit, and pearl tie pin. Hastings in a more casual tweed jacket and trousers, and hailed a taxi through the bustling morning streets. The fog had lifted somewhat, revealing the city's architecture in sharp relief. The grand facades of Mayfair townhouses, the hurried pedestrians clutching umbrellas against the intermittent drizzle. As the taxi rattled along, Poirot gazed out the window, his mind reconstructing the timeline of the murder. The first burned telegram, the second fatal one from Kent, the poisoned brandy. Each step meticulously planned. The killer was not impulsive but calculated, a chess player moving pieces across a board where Lord Edgware was the unfortunate king. Upon arriving at the Edgware mansion, the wrought-iron gates creaked open under the watchful eye of a police constable stationed there since the night of the crime. The gravel driveway crunched under their feet as they approached the imposing front door, flanked by stone lions and ivy-covered walls. Miss Lemon, the maid, answered their knock, her eyes widening in surprise. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, Inspector Japp isn't here yet. Shall I fetch Mr. Alton?" Poirot inclined his head graciously. "Oui, mademoiselle. And please, assemble the staff in the drawing-room. There are questions that must be asked in the light of day." The drawing-room was a testament to Victorian opulence. Heavy velvet drapes in deep crimson, ornate gold-framed mirrors reflecting the crystal chandelier overhead, and plush armchairs arranged around a marble fireplace. The staff filed in quietly, Mrs. Baxter wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron, Tommy fidgeting with his collar, Polly keeping her eyes downcast, and Alton entering last, his expression a mask of professional composure. Poirot positioned himself by the fireplace, his back to the warmth, while Hastings stood sentinel by the door. "Bon, let us begin," Poirot announced, his voice carrying the authority of one accustomed to unravelling mysteries. "Monsieur Alton, you have served Lord Edgware faithfully, non? Yet your past employment with Sir Montague Bryce raises questions. Was your move to this household mere coincidence, or something more deliberate?" Alton's face remained impassive, but a slight tightening of his lips betrayed his unease. "I left Sir Montague's service for better wages, sir. Nothing more. His lordship offered a generous position." Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, fixed on the butler's face. "And the man in the garden, the one Mademoiselle Polly saw you speaking with, the one with the scar. Who was he truly? Not a coal merchant, I think." Polly gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth while the others exchanged glances. Alton hesitated, his hands clasping and unclasping behind his back. I cannot say, sir. It was a private matter." Poirot stepped forward, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial tone. "Private, monsieur, or perilous? We know this scarred man sent the telegram from Kent, arranged the delivery in Soho. He is the shadow behind this murder. If you protect him, you become an accomplice." The room fell silent, the only sound the distant ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. Alton sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping as if a great weight had been lifted, or perhaps added. "Very well, Monsieur Poirot. The man is my brother, Elias Alton. He bears a scar from a childhood accident. He came to me in desperation 2 nights before the murder. Elias works as a clerk for Sir Montague Bryce, handling confidential matters. He claimed Bryce had sent him to deliver a message to Lord Edgware, a warning about the secret subsidiary deal. But Elias feared it was more than that. He suspected Bryce of plotting something sinister." Hastings leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Sinister how, poison?" Alton shook his head. Elias didn't know details, but he mentioned overhearing Bryce and Ronald Marsh discussing eliminating the obstacle. "I urged him to go to the police, but he was afraid. Bryce holds his debts, you see. Elias has a gambling problem, owes thousands. He left after our talk, promising to stay hidden." Poirot stroked his moustache thoughtfully, absorbing this revelation. "And the cellar, Monsieur Alton? Did your brother have access? Could he have tampered with the brandy?" Alton paled. "No, sir. He never entered the house. Our meeting was outside, brief. I swear it." Satisfied for the moment, Poirot dismissed the staff, except for Alton, whom he questioned further about Elias's whereabouts. "He has a small flat in Whitechapel, sir, but he's gone underground since the murder. Frightened, I suppose." Poirot nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. "We must find him, Alton. He may be the key to unlocking Bryce's involvement, or Marsh's." As the staff dispersed, whispering among themselves, Poirot and Hastings stepped into the garden, the air fresh with the scent of damp earth and blooming roses. The garden gate, where Polly had seen the brothers, was overgrown with vines, a perfect spot for clandestine meetings. Their next move was swift. a telegram to Inspector Japp requesting a search of Elias Alton's flat. While awaiting a response, they visited Sir Montague Bryce's offices again, this time unannounced. The reception area was abuzz with activity, clerks typing furiously, telephones ringing, but Bryce's secretary, a prim woman with pinned-up hair, tried to bar their way. "Sir Montague is in a meeting, gentlemen. You'll have to wait." Poirot, undeterred, flashed his card. "It is urgent, mademoiselle. A matter of life and death." Grudgingly, she ushered them into the inner sanctum, where Bryce sat behind his massive desk, surrounded by blueprints and ledgers. Bryce looked up, his beard bristling with irritation. "Poirot again? I've told you all I know." Poirot seated himself without invitation, Hastings hovering nearby. "Not quite, Sir Montague. We know of Elias Alton, your clerk, the scarred man. He visited his brother at the Edgware estate, carrying your message perhaps, and your discussions with Ronald Marsh, eliminating the obstacle." "What obstacle precisely?" Bryce's face reddened, his fists clenching on the desk. "Preposterous! Elias is a lowly clerk. I barely know him. As for Marsh, we talked business, nothing more. You're grasping at straws, Poirot." But Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Straws that form a noose, monsieur. Your typewriter matches the one used for the telegram. Your grudge against Edgware is well known. And now, a connection through Alton." Bryce stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. "Enough! I had no hand in Edgware's death. If Marsh said otherwise, he's lying to cover his own tracks. Check his finances. He's drowning in debt, needed Edgware's inheritance desperately." Poirot rose gracefully, tipping his hat. "We shall, Sir Montague, and we shall find Elias Alton. Bonjour." Outside, Hastings whistled softly. "He's rattled, Poirot. Think he's our man?" Poirot shook his head. He protests too much, but his denial rings true in part. The plot thickens. Marsh's debts, Bryce's denials, the Altons' fears. We must locate Elias before the killer does. By midday, Japp's reply arrived. Elias's flat was empty, but signs of a hasty departure, clothes strewn about, a half-packed suitcase. A neighbour reported seeing Elias leave with a man matching Ronald Marsh's description the previous evening. "Marsh," Hastings muttered, as they read the telegram in a nearby cafe, over sandwiches and tea. "He's been slippery from the start. That 20-minute gap in his alibi. Enough time to meet Elias." Poirot nodded, crumbling his napkin. "Oui, Marsh knows Elias holds evidence. We must confront him at his club before he silences the witness permanently." The Gentlemen's Club in Mayfair was a haven of leather-bound luxury. Deep armchairs, billiard tables clicking with ivory balls, and the murmur of privileged conversations. Ronald Marsh lounged in a corner booth, a cigar in hand, his slicked-back hair gleaming under the chandelier light. He looked up as Poirot and Hastings approached, his grin fading. "You two again? Persistent, aren't you?" Poirot sat opposite, his expression stern. "Monsieur Marsh, where is Elias Alton? You were seen leaving his flat last night." Marsh's eyes widened, but he recovered with a laugh. "Elias who? Never heard of him. Must be a mistake." Hastings slammed his hand on the table. "No games, Marsh. Your alibi has holes. Your dealings with Bryce are suspect. And now this. You're in deep." Marsh stubbed out his cigar, his face hardening. "All right, fine. I know Elias. He approached me, said he had proof Bryce was sabotaging Edgware's business. Wanted money to disappear. I met him, but he bolted when I refused to pay. Swear it." Poirot leaned in, his voice a whisper. "And the eliminating the obstacle, what did that mean?" Marsh glanced around, lowering his voice. "Bryce wanted to buy out Edgware's shares cheap, force a merger. Eliminate meant ruin him financially, not kill him. But someone twisted it. Maybe Jane's actor friend, Ross. He's got a temper, and Jane stands to gain from the will." As they left the club, the sun dipping low, Poirot's mind raced. Marsh's story held water, but doubts lingered. Elias was missing, possibly in danger. Back at the flat, a message from Japp awaited. Elias found hiding in a dockside warehouse, terrified but alive. "Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes alight. "Tomorrow we hear from the scarred man himself. His testimony may shatter the facade." The day had unveiled alliances and deceptions, drawing the noose tighter around the guilty. Yet the killer's identity remained elusive, a shadow dancing just beyond reach. The mystery hurtles toward its climax, with truths poised to emerge from the darkness. Stay tuned for the revelations that await. Chapter 8. The Scarred Witness. The dockside warehouse in the East End of London loomed like a forgotten giant under the overcast sky. Its corrugated iron walls rusted from years of exposure to the Thames' damp breath. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrived in a black cab that splashed through puddles left by the night's rain, the driver grumbling about the rough neighbourhood. The air was thick with the mingled scents of fish, tar and coal smoke from nearby barges chugging along the river. Inspector Japp waited at the entrance, his overcoat buttoned tight against the chill, a couple of uniformed constables flanking him like silent sentinels. "Poirot, Hastings," Japp greeted with a nod, his breath fogging in the cold air. "We've got Elias Alton inside. Scared witless he is. Says he's been hiding since the murder, afraid for his life." Poirot adjusted his gloves, his sharp eyes taking in the warehouse's shadowy facade. "Afraid of whom exactly, Inspector? Let us hear from the man himself. The truth often hides in the tremors of fear." They stepped inside, the door creaking on its hinges, revealing a vast interior cluttered with crates, barrels, and coils of rope. Dim light filtered through grimy windows high above, casting elongated shadows across the concrete floor. In a cleared corner, under the glow of a single hanging bulb, sat Elias Alton on an upturned crate. He was a gaunt man in his mid-30s, his face pale and drawn, marked by a jagged scar above his left eyebrow that twisted like a lightning bolt frozen in time. His clothes were rumpled, a threadbare coat draped over his shoulders, and his hands trembled as he clutched a tin mug of tea provided by one of the constables. Elias looked up as they approached, his eyes wide with a mix of relief and apprehension. "Monsieur Poirot? They said you'd come. I didn't know who else to trust." Poirot seated himself on a nearby stool with surprising grace, Hastings standing beside him, notebook at the ready, while Japp leaned against a crate, arms crossed. "Monsieur Elias Alton," Poirot began in his precise, accented tones. "Your brother has told us much, but now we seek the full account from you. Begin at the beginning. Your employment with Sir Montague Bryce, the messages, the night in the garden. Omit nothing, for the little details often reveal the grand design." Elias took a shaky sip of tea, his scar twitching slightly as he gathered his thoughts. The warehouse echoed with the distant hoot of a ship's horn, adding to the atmosphere of isolation and urgency. "It started about 6 months ago," Elias said, his voice low and halting. "I was just a clerk in Bryce's office, filing papers, typing letters, that sort of thing. Bryce and Lord Edgware were rivals, always undercutting each other in the steel trade. One day I overheard Bryce on the telephone, raging about Edgware blocking a major contract. 'That man's sins will catch up to him,' he said. I thought it was just talk, but then Bryce started giving me odd tasks, delivering anonymous notes, arranging discreet meetings. About a month before the murder, he handed me a typed message. 'Your debts will be paid in blood.' Told me to send it as a telegram to Edgware from a post office outside London. I chose Kent because it's quiet. No one knows me there." Hastings jotted notes furiously, his pencil scratching against the paper. "And the typewriter?" Poirot interjected gently. "It was Bryce's?" Elias nodded. "Yes, the one in his private office. He dictated the words, I typed them. Wiped it clean after, like he instructed." Japp grunted, shifting his weight. "Why go along with it, man? Sounds like harassment at best." Elias's eyes dropped to his mug. "Debts, Inspector. I owe Bryce a fortune from gambling. Cards, horses, you name it. He holds the notes, could ruin me. Said if I helped, he'd tear them up. But after the first telegram, Edgware burned it. I know because Bryce fumed about it. Then came the second one, the midnight warning. Bryce said it was to soften him up for a business deal, make him paranoid, willing to sell cheap. I sent it from Kent. Wore a scarf to hide my face. Poirot's moustache quivered as he leaned forward. And the delivery to the Edgware estate, the parcel in Soho. Elias looked puzzled at first, then shook his head. That wasn't me. Bryce mentioned a distraction, but I didn't handle it. Maybe another lackey. Bryce has a few shady types on payroll. The group fell silent for a moment. The only sound, the drip of water from a leaky roof somewhere in the warehouse. Poirot steepled his fingers, his mind whirring like a finely tuned engine. Now, monsieur, the night you met your brother in the garden. What did you tell him? Elias sighed, rubbing his scar absently. I was scared after sending the second telegram. Went to see Alton, my brother, for advice. Told him about Bryce's plans. The eliminating the obstacle talk I'd overheard between Bryce and Ronald Marsh. They met in Bryce's office a week before the murder, whispering about making Edgware disappear from the board. I thought it meant business ruin, not poison. Alton urged me to go to the police, but I couldn't. Bryce would destroy me. I fled after our talk, hid here when I heard Edgware was dead. Hastings closed his notebook with a snap. And Marsh visiting your flat last night. What did he want? Elias's face darkened. He tracked me down somehow, probably through Bryce. Said he knew I was involved, offered money to keep quiet. When I refused, he got angry, said, "You'll regret this," and left. I think he's in on it, covering his tracks. Japp straightened up. We'll bring Marsh in for questioning again. And Bryce too. This stinks of conspiracy. Poirot rose, pacing a small circle under the bulb's light, his shoes clicking on the concrete. Oui, but consider, the cyanide in the brandy. Who placed it there? Elias, you never entered the house. Elias shook his head vehemently. Never. I stayed outside the gate. As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused, turning back to Elias. One more thing, monsieur. The scar, how did you come by it? Elias touched it self-consciously. Childhood fall playing with Alton. Why? Poirot smiled enigmatically. It has been our guiding mark through this fog. You have done well to come forward. The constables will protect you now. Outside, as they climbed into the cab, the river's fog rolling in thicker, Poirot turned to Hastings and Japp. The pieces align, mes amis. Bryce orchestrates the threats. Marsh colludes for gain. Elias the unwilling pawn. But the poison? That requires access, intimacy. We must revisit the estate, examine the cellar again. And Jane Wilkinson, her role may be more than beneficiary. The cab jostled back towards central London, passing wharves laden with cargo and workers shouting orders. At Scotland Yard, Japp arranged for arrests. Bryce and Marsh to be detained for questioning. Poirot and Hastings, meanwhile, returned to the Edgware mansion, the afternoon sun breaking through the clouds to cast a deceptive warmth on the stone facade. Miss Lemon let them in, her apron dusted with flour from baking. Back again, gentlemen. The house is quiet. Too quiet, if you ask me. Poirot requested access to the cellar once more, descending the narrow stone steps into the cool, musty depths. The brandy racks stood as before, but Poirot's keen eye spotted a faint footprint in the dust near the tampered bottle's spot. A man's shoe, size 10, with a distinctive wear on the heel. "Hastings!" Poirot exclaimed, kneeling to examine it closer. This print was not here before. Someone returned, perhaps to cover tracks. Upstairs, they questioned Alton again, who denied any recent cellar visits. But when shown a sketch of the print, he paled. That looks like Marsh's shoes. He visited Lord Edgware a day before the murder, argued in the study. Maybe he went down for a bottle. The puzzle shifted, new suspicions blooming. As evening fell, with Bryce and Marsh en route to custody, Poirot sat in the drawing room, sipping a tisane prepared by Miss Lemon. The scarred witness has spoken, revealing the puppet masters. But the hand that poured the poison, that is the final twist. Hastings paced, the room's shadows lengthening. Bryce pulls the strings, Marsh executes, Elias warns. But who strikes the fatal blow? A telegram arrived from Jap. Bryce denies all, claims Elias is lying to clear his debts. Marsh admits meeting Elias but insists innocence. Poirot's eyes gleamed. They point fingers, but the truth will out. Tomorrow we gather them all, the suspects, the witnesses. A little reunion to unmask the killer. The warehouse testimony had cracked the facade, exposing layers of deceit, but the core remained hidden. As night enveloped the city, Poirot's little grey cells churned relentlessly, drawing ever closer to the heart of the midnight telegram's deadly message. The climax approaches, with confrontations that promise to shatter illusions. Stay tuned for the gathering storm. Chapter 9. The gathering of suspects, the grand drawing room of the Edgware estate, glowed with the soft light of crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing across polished mahogany tables and gilded mirrors. The air was thick with tension, as if the very walls held their breath. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his small frame commanding attention, his meticulously waxed moustache gleaming under the light. Captain Hastings stood by his side, clutching a notebook, his eyes darting across the assembled faces. Inspector Japp leaned against the fireplace, his pipe unlit but clenched between his teeth, a silent observer ready to act. The clock on the mantel ticked towards 7 p.m., its steady rhythm underscoring the gravity of the moment. Poirot had summoned all the key players in the murder of Lord Edgware for a confrontation, a carefully orchestrated gathering to unravel the deadly web of the midnight telegram. Seated on plush velvet chairs were the suspects and witnesses. Jane Wilkinson, radiant in a sapphire dress, her actress's poise barely masking a flicker of unease. Donald Ross, her co-star, lounging with forced nonchalance, his dark eyes wary. Ronald Marsh, his slicked-back hair slightly dishevelled, fingers drumming nervously on his knee. Sir Montague Bryce, his bearded face set in a scowl, radiating indignation. Alton the butler, standing rigidly near the door, his professional calm strained. And Elias Alton, the scarred witness, perched on the edge of his seat, his hands twisting in his lap. The household staff, Mrs. Baxter, Miss Lemon, Tommy and Polly, hovered at the back, their expressions a mix of curiosity and dread. Poirot's voice cut through the silence, precise and deliberate. Mesdames et messieurs, we are here to confront the truth behind Lord Edgware's murder, the poison in his brandy, the telegrams of warning, the shadows of motive. All converge in this room. He began pacing, his polished shoes silent on the thick Persian rug. Let us reconstruct. Lord Edgware died by cyanide, administered through a tampered brandy bottle in the cellar. A telegram sent from Kent warned of his death at midnight. A taunt, a promise. Another, earlier telegram burned in the fireplace, hinted at earlier threats. The killer is cunning, intimate with Edgware's habits, and bold enough to announce their intent. His eyes swept the room, lingering on each face. Jane Wilkinson shifted, her smile tight. Monsieur Poirot, surely you don't think I'd risk my career for such a thing? I was on stage, adored by hundreds. Ross nodded in support. She's right. We were together, rehearsing. Check the theatre logs. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Oui, madame. Your alibi is strong, but alibis can be arranged. Your letters to Lord Edgware, found hidden in his desk, spoke of desperation for freedom. And Monsieur Ross, your devotion to Madame Wilkinson is evident. Did you act to secure her future? Ross bristled, his charm slipping. That's absurd. I'm an actor, not an assassin. I barely knew the man. Poirot turned to Ronald Marsh, whose nervous drumming stopped abruptly. Monsieur Marsh, your debts are vast, and your uncle's will names you a beneficiary. Your 20-minute absence from the club, your meeting with Elias Alton, most suspicious. Marsh leaned forward, his voice sharp. I told you I refused Elias's blackmail. I didn't touch that brandy. Ask Bryce. He's the one with the real grudge. Sir Montague Bryce snorted, his beard quivering. Preposterous. I'm a businessman, not a poisoner. Yes, I wanted Edgware's shares, but I'd never stoop to murder. Elias is lying to save his own skin. Elias flinched, his scar stark against his pale face. I told you everything, Monsieur Poirot. Bryce made me send those telegrams. He wanted Edgware scared. Broken. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Alton. And you, Monsieur Alton, knew of your brother's role, yet said nothing until pressed. Your loyalty to him, or to someone else, clouds your candor. Alton stiffened, his voice low. I only wanted to protect Elias. I had no part in this. Poirot stopped pacing, facing the group. Let us consider the cellar, the stage of the crime. The tampered bottle bore scratches on its seal, and a footprint, size 10, with a worn heel, was found nearby. Monsieur Marsh, your shoes match this description. Marsh paled, his hands gripping the chair. I was in the study, not the cellar. I argued with my uncle, yes, about the subsidiary deal, but I didn't go downstairs. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Yet the footprint places you there, and the scarred man, Elias, links Bryce to the telegrams, but not the poison. Someone else had access, opportunity and motive. He turned to the staff, his voice softening. Madam Baxter, you filled the decanter. Tommy, you fetched the bottle. Miss Lemon, you found the body. Polly, you saw the scarred man with Alton. But one detail stands out. He paused, drawing a small vial from his pocket. The ash from the burned telegram, collected days ago. This ash, from the fireplace, contained fragments of a telegram form, identical to the one from Kent. It was destroyed to hide its sender, but not entirely. A faint watermark, visible under a lens, matches the stationery of Bryce's office. Bryce stood, his face red. This is nonsense. Anyone could use that paper. Poirot smiled thinly. Perhaps, but combined with Elias's testimony, it points to you. The room grew taut, eyes darting between suspects. Poirot continued, his voice rising. The killer wanted Lord Edgware to fear, to suffer before death. The telegrams were a game, a psychological torment. Bryce, you orchestrated the threats to weaken Edgware's resolve. Marsh, you stood to gain his fortune. Madam Wilkinson, your freedom came at his death. But the poison required intimacy, someone who could tamper with the bottle unnoticed. He paused, his gaze settling on Alton. Monsieur Alton, you served the brandy. You had access to the cellar, the bottle, the decanter, and your brother's debts gave you a motive to protect him from Bryce's threats. Alton staggered back, his composure crumbling. No, I'd never. I loved my job, my place here. But Elias stood, his voice breaking. Alton, tell them! You knew about the cyanide. I told you Bryce kept a vial in his office safe for pest control. You were angry at Edgware for docking your wages last month. The room erupted in gasps. Jane clutching Ross's arm, Marsh staring in shock. Poirot raised a hand for silence. The cyanide came from Bryce's office, but Alton placed it in the bottle, believing it would save his brother from ruin. A tragic loyalty. Japp stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Alton, you're under arrest. Elias, you're coming too for questioning. As the constables led the brothers away, Alton's head hung low, while Elias wept softly. Jane exhaled, her poise returning. Poor man, what a dreadful mess. Marsh muttered, I knew nothing of this, I swear. Bryce stormed out, vowing to clear his name. Poirot watched them go, his expression unreadable. The puzzle is nearly complete, Hastings, but one piece remains. Why the second telegram to me? Someone wanted me here, to witness the unravelling. As the group dispersed into the night, the estate's grandeur felt hollow, its secrets laid bare. Poirot and Hastings lingered, the detective's mind still turning. The killer is caught, but the orchestrator, the mind behind the telegrams, may yet slip away, he murmured. The case teetered on the edge of resolution, but a final truth lurked in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. Stay tuned for the closing act of this deadly drama. Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. The fog had returned to London, wrapping the Edgware estate in a ghostly shroud, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stood in the grand study where Lord Edgware had met his end. The room was unchanged since that fateful night. The oak desk still bore the faint ring of a brandy glass. The open window's curtains swayed gently, and the air carried a lingering chill, as if the ghost of the murdered man lingered. The clock on the mantel struck 8, its chimes echoing through the silent mansion. Inspector Japp had just left to oversee the detention of Alton and Elias, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone to piece together the final threads of the mystery. Alton's arrest had seemed to close the case, but Poirot's little grey cells were restless, sensing an unseen hand behind the curtain. "Hastings, mon ami," he said, his voice low and measured. "We have caught the hand that poured the poison, but not the mind that planned it. The telegram summoning me here, it was no coincidence. Tonight we unveil the true mastermind." Poirot paced the study, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug, his eyes scanning every detail: the scattered papers, the photograph of Jane Wilkinson, the faint almond scent still clinging to the air. He stopped at the desk, picking up the crumpled note found in Edgware's hand. Its words, "Your sins catch up tonight," etched in his memory. This note, Hastings, was not just a warning. It was a performance, designed to draw attention, to ensure I would investigate. Why? Because the killer wanted the world to see their triumph. Hastings frowned, his notebook open but untouched. "But Alton," confessed Poirot. "He poisoned the brandy to save his brother from Bryce's threats. Isn't that the end of it?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a spark of revelation in his eyes. "Non, mon ami. Alton was a pawn, manipulated by a far cleverer mind. Let us summon the players one last time." Within the hour, the drawing room was filled once more, the chandeliers casting a golden glow over the tense assembly. Jane Wilkinson sat poised, her sapphire dress catching the light, her smile serene but guarded. Donald Ross leaned close to her, his actor's charm dimmed by unease. Ronald Marsh slouched in a chair, his face pale, his earlier bravado gone. Sir Montague Bryce stood by the fireplace, his bearded jaw set, indignation simmering beneath his glare. The staff, Mrs. Baxter, Miss Lemon, Tommy and Polly, hovered at the edges, their presence a reminder of the household's silent role in the tragedy. Japp returned, his pipe now lit, puffing clouds of smoke as he eyed the group. Poirot took centre stage, his small stature radiating authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we stand at the heart of a murder most cunning. Lord Edgware's death was no simple act of vengeance. It was a symphony of deceit, with every note played to perfection." He turned to Alton, now under guard by a constable, his face ashen. "Monsieur Alton, you admitted to poisoning the brandy, believing it would free your brother Elias from Sir Montague Bryce's grasp. You took cyanide from Bryce's office, where Elias had seen it stored, and tampered with the bottle in the cellar. But tell me, how did you know to act that night?" Alton swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "A note, sir, slipped under my door 2 days before, typed, no signature. It said Edgware was planning to sack me, that Bryce would forgive Elias's debts if I acted decisively. I thought it was my only chance." Poirot produced the ash vial from his pocket, holding it up. This note, like the telegrams, was typed on Bryce's machine. "But you, Sir Montague, deny involvement." Bryce growled. "I do. Alton's lying, or someone framed me." Poirot's gaze shifted to Elias, whose scar gleamed under the chandelier light. "Monsieur Elias, you sent the telegrams under Bryce's orders to frighten Edgware into a business deal, but you feared murder, oui? Yet you never saw who slipped Alton that note." Elias nodded, his hands trembling. "I swear it wasn't me. I only did what Bryce told me. Sent the messages, stayed quiet." Poirot turned to Marsh, whose fingers gripped the chair arm. Monsieur Marsh, your debts and your uncle's will gave you motive. Your 20-minute absence from the club, your meeting with Elias. You played a role, non? Marsh shook his head vehemently. I wanted his money, sure, but I didn't kill him. I met Elias to stop him blabbing, not to plan a murder. Jane Wilkinson laughed softly, her voice cutting through the tension. Really, Monsieur Poirot, this is all so dramatic. I was on stage, free of George, happy at last. Why drag me into this? Ross nodded in agreement. She's right. We're actors, not criminals. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Ah, Madame Wilkinson, but you are the key. Your letters to Edgware, hidden in his desk, spoke of desperation. Your alibi is perfect, too perfect. And the telegram that summoned me, sent to Scotland Yard in my name, ensured I would unravel this case. Who benefits from such exposure? He paused, letting the question hang in the air. The room grew still, the ticking clock deafening. Poirot stepped toward Jane, his gaze unwavering. It was you, madame. You orchestrated this murder, using Alton's loyalty, Bryce's greed, and Marsh's desperation. You sent the note to Alton, typed on Bryce's machine during a visit to his office. Perhaps disguised as a business matter, you knew of the cyanide from gossip in elite circles, where Bryce's pest control was no secret. You planted the idea in Alton's mind, knowing he'd act to save his brother. And the telegrams? You arranged for Elias to send them, through Bryce's orders, to torment Edgware and muddy the waters. Jane's smile faltered, her hands clenching in her lap. This is absurd! I was on stage, applauded by hundreds. Poirot raised a finger. Oui, but your co-star, Monsieur Ross, was not always on stage. He slipped away during a scene change, long enough to deliver the Soho parcel. A distraction to keep the staff busy while Alton tampered with the brandy. Your photograph, signed with love, was no mere fan gift. It was a signal of your partnership. You stood to gain Edgware's fortune, your freedom, and a new life with Ross. Ross stood, his face flushed. You can't prove this. It's all conjecture. But Poirot produced a small receipt from his pocket, found in Ross's dressing room during a discreet search. This, monsieur, is for brown paper and string, purchased in Soho hours before the delivery. Your handwriting, no? Jane's poise cracked, her eyes blazing. You little man, you think you've caught me? George was a monster, controlling my every move. I deserved my freedom, my life. Alton was a fool, easy to manipulate. Bryce and Marsh were greedy, perfect scapegoats. And Ross... She glanced at him, her voice softening. He loved me enough to help. Ross slumped, defeated, as Japp signalled the constables. Jane Wilkinson, Donald Ross, you're under arrest for conspiracy to murder. The room erupted in gasps. Mrs. Baxter clutching Miss Lemon's arm, Marsh staring in shock, Bryce muttering curses. As the constables led Jane and Ross away, her head held high like a tragic heroine, Poirot turned to Hastings. The telegram to me, Hastings. It was her flourish, her desire to see her cleverness admired. She underestimated the little grey cells. Japp clapped Poirot on the shoulder. Brilliant work, old chap. Case closed. The staff dispersed, whispering while Bryce and Marsh left, their roles as unwitting pawns now clear. The estate fell silent, its secrets laid bare under Poirot's relentless scrutiny. As Poirot and Hastings stepped into the foggy night, the detective's face was serene. The human heart, Hastings, is a maze of passion and deceit. Jane Wilkinson played her part to perfection, but no performance escapes Hercule Poirot. They walked toward a waiting taxi, the city's lights blurred in the mist. The midnight telegram had delivered its message, and justice had answered. If you've enjoyed this twisting tale, grab a cup of tea, hit that subscribe button, and join us for more mysteries. Your support means the world to us.